traders bet millions minutes before Trump's Iran talk postponement was initiated, making it pretty clear that somebody knew what was coming and was prepared to economically benefit. What can you tell us?
You put the oil trade up there. There was a bet that the price of oil would tank. That was a bet of about 150 million. Another bet was placed that the market would lift, in other words, rise dramatically. That was a $1.5 billion bet. Now, whenever you bet in the market, which is effectively what it's about, it's a big casino. For those who are only in it for casino purposes, as opposed to others that draw income from it over time. What we need to understand is that you bet less on the downside and bet more on the upside. So the $150 million bet paid off because somebody within 3 or 4 minutes of President Trump's announcement knew what President Trump was going to announce. The same thing was true for the 1.05 billion bet that you've got up there now. Both of these bets paid off handsomely. Now, who in the White House could possibly have known, and who in the White House has access to that kind of capital that could have a stupendous impact on profits? Well, I'll let everybody in the audience sort of let that sink in, think about it, and understand that in a normal setting, were this to happen, I would say 50 years ago, 100 years ago, maybe even 30 years ago, the Attorney General would be sitting at his desk or her desk and receive a note saying, we have witnessed this unnatural market behavior that's resulting in mega profits, and it all seems to come right before the president makes an announcement. We feel this justifies an investigation. Well, I don't think with Pam Bondi in there's any chance of that investigation happening on the executive side. Now then, the question is, well, what about Congress? Will someone in Congress stand up and say, look at this is outrageous? Maybe, but it's unlikely that it will gain much traction because the population of people that sit on the Hill in Congress are busy with insider trading. In other words, everyone in Washington is profiting one way or another from the disasters that are unfolding in front of us on the Hill and here, in the Middle East and here at home.
This is not the first time this has happened. There's been a number of times where pronouncements made by the White House had this mysterious market trading where somebody made millions of dollars. And yet I haven't seen a single investigation at all so far, to your point, exactly. And it just looks like this has become some kind of legalized, I don't know if extortion is the right word, but certainly corruption. But it's not hidden, though. That's the thing. This is out in the open. I mean, what can happen? What can anybody do to try and bring some accountability or at least shine a light on what's actually going on and who is benefiting?
Well, this really reflects a level of contempt for the masses of American citizens who are struggling to make ends meet. You have to stop and consider that. You're talking about people in the White House, many of whom are billionaires who have access to this kind of capital, along with, I would imagine, brigades of attorneys to protect them from prosecution. And they're exploiting their position to enrich themselves. I think their attitude is, well, that's what we do. That's how we got to be billionaires. We didn't all sit around in New York City and twiddle our thumbs. So I think that's part of the problem. But imagine the contempt that must exist for the American people in general for this sort of thing to go on as blatantly as you point out it has. This is an open and shut case on corruption. There's no question about it. But will it be investigated? I don't think so, for the reasons that I just outlined. There's no incentive to do it inside the executive branch. There's no incentive to do it on the Hill. Now, let's pause for a second and understand something. A very similar event occurred in 1781 in France. That's 8 years before the revolution breaks out in 1789. And a man named Necker was the French Minister of Finance. He put together a budget. It was actually a very good budget. It was an attempt to deal with the overspending, the mismanagement of funds by Louis XIV's cabinet and ministers. It failed. It failed because the aristocracy, in other words, the elites, were using their position to monetize whatever came out of the budget to steal money, effectively. And Necker did his best, but he couldn't make it work, and ultimately his budget was defeated. My point is that 8 years later, you get the French Revolution. We all know what happened at that point. And let's put it this way, the rewards for this kind of corruption and deceit were pretty serious. And the people involved in this, the vast majority of which went to the guillotine, were ultimately destroyed. And the French nation never really completely recovered from it. And it struggled for many, many years. And I think we're in danger of something like that happening here because too many people are beginning to notice. Most Americans, most of the time, are willing to impute good intentions to the people in Washington. Big mistake in my judgment, but they are. They ought to look at this and understand, forget it. There's no altruism inside the Beltway. Everything, unfortunately, is treated as an opportunity for self-enrichment and profit. Think long and hard about that as you contemplate this entire war that's been developing in the Persian Gulf.
Right. I want to bring up one more point. You say that more people are starting to notice that this is just a couple of hours ago. This is the BBC. Oil traders bet millions minutes before the Trump's Iran talks. And then you look a little bit further. It says the BBC has contacted the White House for comment. A spokesman told Financial Times that they did not tolerate any administration official illegally profiteering on insider trade or trading knowledge. But yet then they go on to describe, however, once the timing happened and these stocks happened, you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars were made. So I think that this again gets to your point there. It's like contempt. It's like, we're going to do this out in the open. It's in the market, and you can't hide this kind of stuff. And then when the money comes in and people start asking, we just say, oh, we don't tolerate that. We don't do that here. And then moving on to the next thing. And then Trump will just move on to the next crisis, et cetera. And I'll be shocked if Pam Bondi investigates this. I mean, don't have to look much further. We got to say it. Then the Epstein files, all this talk and all this kind of stuff, and all these things have been released, and yet not one person has even been investigated or brought up on charges, much less anybody paid account for the thousands of people that were victims to this. And it's just looking more and more like the administration is not accountable to anyone. Is there a way out of this besides, as you said, something like 1789?
I don't think so. In other words, we vote, we always get the same outcome. John McCain is president. So I think that's where we are. And there is no easy way out, just as there's no easy way out for President Trump in the Persian Gulf.